And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, will my new special mask protect me from COVID if it's worn by my wife simultaneously? And with the new relief package making its way through Congress, could I finally pay for my companion animals' exorbitant healthcare needs? And now, the podcast host who could be protecting his family from insurrectionists right now outside your window, Pete Dominic.
Yeah, thank you, Pete Co, for another amazing intro. Love it. So a mask like that two people share like fundies, but it's a mask. Sounds sexy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I hope you had a good weekend and a fine, happy September 11th. Who says that? I don't know. I know two people now whose birthdays are on September 11th. Rough stuff. I mean, imagine telling someone, yeah, my birthday is September 11th. And now, January 6th is a day that will live in infamy as well. A friend of mine is born on January 6th, and people remark about that. Least important detail. I mean, there couldn't be a less important detail, but I'm purposely avoiding the commemorations and everything around September 11th because it's very, very tough and challenging and painful for me personally to look back, and I've done so much of the looking back. I don't think we should ever forget and look away. But, you know, you have your own personal choices. Also, on Saturdays, I generally put my phone and screens away until nighttime, which I usually sit back and watch a feature or whatever. And so I really wasn't trying to pay too much attention to it. But lots to talk about, of course, when it comes to what it all means. We heard from a bunch of the former presidents, except for Trump, who was like, I don't know, I guess he went to talk to the NYPD or something, and he also he did a color commentary on a boxing match, and he put out a statement in support of the head of the Moonies, which is a terribly dangerous cult. So, I mean, that's what he was concerning himself with, while the other living ex-presidents showed up or did something or said something, including President Bush. I'll play that for you. So lots to get to here in the opening of the show, but I have two awesome guests joining me. It's Monday, so I've got the great Maura Quint, Maura Mondays, and I've got the education correspondent for NPR, who I love, and she's a great author as well. Anya Kamanetz joins me, too. So very excited to have both these guests joining me, but lots of news to get to. Do want to say quickly, I have decided not to run for town council. I explored it for almost 4 weeks, and I found out a lot of things that were really upsetting and ugly about local politics, specifically here where I live. And I want to work on improving some of the organizations. And, you know, plus I was going to run as a write-in candidate. It was just such a long shot. If my name were on the ballot, I was fully in. And if there was more time to do it. But with just like 8 weeks left until the election and not having my name on the ballot, it seemed like not the best way to spend my time. But I will maybe in a couple of years do it. Who knows? Still a lot remains to be seen. If there's somebody else that's more qualified and a better candidate, I'm happy to support that person too. But I've really enjoyed this experience, tried to be as transparent in terms of telling you about it as I can, and would love to talk more about it. But yeah, it's official. I'm not running for town council, but hope to run for something in the future. And if you're running for something, let me know, because several listeners have gotten involved, and I'd love to find ways to support you. And if you aren't already supporting this podcast that you're listening to, what are you waiting for? It's just $5 or more. A lot of people pay a lot more, and I'm thankful for every one of you because I can't do it without you. It's free, but it isn't cheap, so please sign up right now. Go to standupwithpete.com, standupwithpete.com, and learn more. All right, let's learn more about what happened in the last 24, shall we? It's time for the news. All right, I want to begin with what I thought was pretty much the most important commentary. I don't want to spend a lot of time on 9/11. I have two things here that I want to share with you, pieces of audio, and it comes up, I think, in my conversation with Maura. But I want to first share with you Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. They were doing coverage of all of the commemorations, and they were talking about how many people died on 9/11. And she talked about that we're having a 9/11 every day, and because of COVID, and I can't I think that's such an important way of thinking about it as we commemorate the terrorist attack. It's obviously not the same. Well, here it is.
Well, I think there are so many parallels to how much more difficult it is to do any of the things that anyone who has spoken today has done, to call the country to a higher purpose. You've got politicians and prominent folks in the media outraged by steps that a president, not too many presidents after the one we heard from today, would try to save his country from an unthinkable death toll. I mean, as many people die every 2 days as died on September 11th in this country who don't have to die. Anyone in this country over 12 could be vaccinated, and people who are vaccinated are not the ones tragically packing ICUs in this country.
So well said and so important. I really appreciated that commentary. All right, George W. Bush, I appreciate some of his commentary. I can't believe I'm saying this, but he used a speech in Shanksville at the Flight 93 Memorial to underscore the threat posed by domestic extremists. That's right, and a lot of folks on the right were outraged by this, but he's right. I can't say it. I'm like the Fonz trying to apologize. He's right. George W. Bush is right.
And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdainful pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
Yeah, well done. Well done. Well done. Okay, and now here's the last guy, Donald Trump. Well, I'm not going to play him, but I am going to play his niece, who I have grown to really admire and respect her analysis and her courage. Mary Trump on CNN with Jim Acosta talking about how much of a dipshit her uncle is.
And last I checked, nobody pushed back on the fact that on the 20th anniversary of the worst tragedy to hit this country, he was commentating a boxing match to line his own pockets.
Right. I want to talk to you about that, what your uncle did last night. He gave color commentary at a pay-per-view boxing match on the 9/11 anniversary. As someone with a degree in clinical psychology, I wanted to get your take on him doing that on such a somber anniversary. I mean, this is bizarre.
But it's entirely in keeping in what Donald always does. He doesn't understand dignity. He doesn't understand tragedy. He doesn't understand anything that doesn't pertain directly to him. And he will always push the envelope as long as he's allowed to. And this is the problem here. He's always allowed to. He's always allowed to get away with it. So you and I might think it's bizarre behavior, because it is for any decent human being. But one, he's not a decent human being. And two, where's the pushback? Nobody raised their voices on his side of the aisle against that appearance. So he will continue to get away with whatever he can get away with as long as they let him.
Oh, she just is so good. I'm not sure that anybody is better at explaining, because granted, she's got a degree in psychiatry, I believe, but she's also his niece. She's dealt with this nightmare of a human her whole life. And she's just so, I think, eloquent at how she explains how much of an awful, horrible human being he is. Also, this was probably the thing that went most viral on the Sunday shows. I thought this was great. Roland Martin just driving a bus all over Chris Christie, putting it in reverse and driving back over him to his face on ABC's This Week.
I'm sorry, Republican Party, they made their choice. Yes. And I appreciate the speech, Governor, but the reality is this. You have to admit, Sarah, you have to admit the role that you played in putting the person in leadership who is driving conspiracy theories. It's one thing to condemn them after the fact, but you have to own up to the role that you played in putting the person in power. The time
we both ran campaigns against
No. Let me finish.
First off, I don't have to admit, First off, I don't admit anything to you.
Can I finish?
First off, I don't admit to you. And second, I ran against Donald Trump in 2016.
You also coached him for the debate.
against Donald
You
Trump
ran
in
against,
2016.
here's the deal, you ran against him. But when a person has principles, morals, and values, they do not support them even if you lose. And what they say is, I choose patriotism and the country over party and power. And the problem was too many Republicans chose power in riding with Donald Trump as opposed to patriotism in America.
I'll sleep fine tonight with you judging my morals.
Well, guess what? As a voter, as a voter who has 13 nieces and nephews, what I also want to see in America are Republicans and Democrats who have the guts to stand up to narcissists, to folks who lie, to folks who sit here and lead a country in the wrong direction. And what that man has unleashed on this country, any Republican who stood with him has to own it and accept the role that they played.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I'll accept the role that I played in the 2016 election running against him, and I'll accept the role.
Let him finish his point now. Let him finish his point.
And I'll accept the role that I played in my belief that Hillary Clinton was not the right person to be president. We all get to make choices, Roland, in this democracy. I made my choice. I'm on record of my choice, and I'm not walking away from my choice. But it does not preclude me from being able to be critical when the person that I did support does things that I am against. And so this false choice that you're trying to set up, it's a false choice, and one that the American people are not going to buy either.
Woo, yeah. So Chris Christie has always been a naked political animal. Sorry for giving you that image, Chris Christie naked, but he has been. He has been supportive of Donald Trump since he lost to him immediately because he wanted to stay in the party's good graces, and the party is a Trumpist cult. He supported him. He advised him. He gave speech. He gave him all kinds of advice. I mean, he was on the phone with him all the time, totally supported him. And still over Hillary Clinton, even after what we saw 4 years. He'll never change. He is a scoundrel of the highest magnitude. And I just love how Roland Martin took him to task there. All right, now let's move on to some other audio pertaining to all things COVID. Let's start with the Surgeon General making the rounds. I think he was on Meet the Press. I think he was on CNN. I forget where I got this one. This is Surgeon General Vivek Murthy.
How quickly we get to a level where cases are low and stay low really depends on what we do collectively, not just the government, but each of us as private citizens and what universities and schools and businesses do. If we work quickly to get people vaccinated, then we will get there faster. But we've got to come together. Chuck, let me tell you this. One of the things that we cannot afford to do during this pandemic is allow the COVID-19 experience to turn us against each other. Our enemy is the virus. It is not each other. And I was reflecting yesterday, Chuck, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, but what we learned from that terrible tragedy. And one of the things that sticks with me is that in that moment of crisis, we responded by coming together. I saw neighbors helping one another get through this crisis. I saw people turn to strangers who were suffering and offer them support.
Yeah, whatever. Surgeon General, this is not that. And as I talk about with Maura coming up, there's a lot of brown folks, especially Muslim-y, as Waj calls them, who were not feeling safe and welcome and unified. All right, Margaret Brennan was back in the host chair at CBS Face the Nation, back from her maternity leave, and she had a great lineup of guests. This is Dr. James Versilov. He's pediatrician in chief of Texas's Children's Hospital. I think the clip speaks for itself.
25% of new infections in this country are among children. For the people that you are taking care of, how are they getting infected? What are you seeing in your hospital with these kids?
Well, we're seeing record numbers here at Texas Children's throughout Texas. And of course, as the story unfolds across the country, it's not just a regional problem, but a national problem. We've seen a record 750,000 plus, more than 750,000 children infected since early August through early September. We're seeing that play out here locally in one of the largest cities in the United States and the largest children's hospital in the USA. The reality is that we have seen record numbers of children hospitalized during this Delta surge. We have seen record numbers of cases reported by the day, by the week. We continue to be on a high plateau, and the reality is that we may be headed to another peak or to another valley if we all pull together.
All right, there you go. And let me just take a quick, brief moment to toot my own horn. As I put together the show and gather all these different clips, I'm reminded of an email I got over the weekend from a listener. I can't find it, but he said something about how much he learns from the show every day. I aggregate all these clips and put them together and give you a broad range of things to hear and digest with just a little bit of my own commentary. And so I think was it Rob H? Anyway, Rob, thank you for editing your pledge upward. It's a lot of work here on the show, and you can always pay more than just the $5 to support the show and me. So thank you for that. And that's it. Done tooting my own horn. Let's move on to what's next, which is Dumb Chuck Todd asking respected historian Doris Kearns Goodwin on NBC's Meet the Press whether or not Joe Biden's mandates are going to work. And I tweeted last night that I hate this question. This is the question a lot of anchors are asking analysts and experts. Do you think this is a good idea? What was he supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? We allowed for people to almost for a year to get voluntarily vaccinated, and not enough of them did. So we had to put the mandates in place. I mean, it's just are a lot of people going to get mad? Sure. Are some of them not going to get it and quit their jobs? Maybe. But are most people going to now go ahead and get the vaccine because it's mandated? I think probably. Anyway, here he is asking the question anyway with a great answer from Doris Kearns Goodwin, which is why I shared it.
Is this going to work, or is this going to backfire?
Well, I think he had to take the step, and you had to make sure that it had the possibility. Look, mandates have been part of our history for so long. Go back to old George Washington. You know, he mandated that his soldiers get inoculated against smallpox, and he made a great comment that I think appears today. He said, necessity not only authorizes what I'm doing, it compels me to do this, because if the smallpox rages, it'll be worse than the sword of the enemy. I mean, that's where we're at right now. I think for Biden to reestablish himself as the leader of the country, he had to respond to this crisis in a more muscular way. He was losing ground because the states were taking so much authority and talking about what they didn't want to do. And you have to, in a crisis, show that you're mobilizing every national resource, that you're giving direction to the country, and you're making the country feel that they are a whole, that they're collective. Individual liberty has to be balanced against public safety. And I think those are the decisions he finally made.
Yes, good answer. And let's go to another Sunday show. Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace confronting the Nebraska governor. His name is Pete Ricketts on Sunday over his opposition to the new vaccine requirements announced by President Joe Biden. Listen to this.
I want to start with something that you said this week about President Biden's new vaccine mandates. Here you are, sir.
The president's forgotten we live in America. He thinks we live in the Soviet Union. And the hypocrisy of this is just unbelievable.
Governor, what's so objectionable about Biden's vaccine mandates, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, first of all, we have been encouraging people to get vaccinated. We've been providing information and encouraging people to reach out to their neighbors because vaccines work and they will help people. But it should be a personal health care choice. This is not something that the government should mandate, and somebody shouldn't have to make the choice between keeping their job and getting a jab in the arm. I mean, it's just wrong. I've talked to people, a number of people who have told me if they make me take the vaccine, I'm just going to be fired. I'm not going to do it.
But you say it's a personal choice. In fact, to attend school in your state of Nebraska, children must be vaccinated against a number of diseases. Let me put them up on the screen. They must be vaccinated against diphtheria, tetanus and pertussis, polio, measles, mumps and rubella, hepatitis B, and chickenpox. Why are those mandates that parents in your state must comply with and do comply with routinely? Why is it that they're not so objectionable and such a violation of personal freedom, but Biden's vaccine mandates are?
Well, for all those that you just listed, there's a long history that parents have had the opportunity to see how those things have been implemented. And there's still a lot of people out there who don't know what to trust. And in fact, this is really an outcome of what the CDC has done, because they flip-flopped on so many issues, whether it's masks or whether you have to mask after you've been vaccinated and so forth. There's just a lot of people out there who don't know who to trust right now.
Absolute nonsense and horseshit. It's true that government agencies have gotten things wrong, but it's also true that they get things wrong because things change. And sure, there's politics, but this asshole, Pete Ricketts, who says this is wrong, he is anti-abortion and applauded Texas abortion law. I mean, he couldn't be. And it's not the government agencies that are confusing people. It's crazy people in media selling all kinds of snake oil to the public. It's Alex Jones. It's actual politicians saying that COVID's not a thing. It's not that bad, that people aren't dying, that the vaccine is killing people left and right. It's the misinformation coming from individual politicians and members of the right-wing media, not the CDC. Come on, son. Worked up, fired up at Pete Ricketts, rightfully so. Hopefully I'm channeling your anger when you heard that clip. All right, let's go back to CBS's Face the Nation, CBS News, and Margaret Brennan had Scott Gottlieb on to talk about when the Pfizer vaccine, for where he's on the board, would be ready for 5 to 11-year-olds. Big news.
Kids still can't get a vaccine if they're between the ages of 5 and 11. When will it be available to them?
Well, I'm more familiar with the process for Pfizer, the company I'm on a board of. Pfizer has said that they're going to have data before the end of September. They could be ready to file within days of having that data. So they'll file very quickly with the FDA. FDA has said it's going to be a matter of weeks, not months, in terms of their evaluation of that clinical data to make a determination whether they're going to authorize vaccines for kids aged 5 to 11. I interpret that to mean perhaps 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. But I think in a best case scenario, given that timeline that I've just laid out, you could potentially have a vaccine available to children aged 5 to 11 by Halloween. If everything goes well, if the Pfizer data package is in order, and FDA ultimately makes a positive determination. I have confidence in Pfizer in terms of the data that they've collected, but this is really up to the Food and Drug Administration to make an objective determination.
All right, and staying with CBS Face the Nation, here's Margaret Brennan almost getting annoyed and asking, clearly she disagrees. It seems like her opinion's coming through here with the vaccine mandate. Here is the Miami Superintendent of Schools, Albert Carvalho.
I want to ask you about the tragedy, as you just mentioned, of those 13 people who worked for you, right? And in a district which has a high positivity rate, high poverty rate. They were unvaccinated. Why did they refuse to get vaccinated? And
I think that's an important question, and I think it underlies, it underscores a real tragedy in our community and across the country. There are individuals in our communities, particularly ethnic minorities, who as a result of sad examples that are historic in nature, coupled now with misinformation and disinformation from a very small but very vocal minority that seeks to misinform and confuse.
Well, that's why I'm asking you. That's why I want to ask you if the president's mandate and talking it up makes a difference, because the former Surgeon General was tweeting, Jerome Adams, this week that he gets the intent, but many minorities, he says, still have historically founded reservations. Many people have honest questions. So he's saying essentially this may backfire in those minority communities by, if they don't trust the federal government telling them to take a vaccine isn't going to help.
I understand, and that's why local governments that are usually trusted, school districts, teachers, educators, superintendents, school board members, community-based organizations need to step up to provide an echo and a chorus of reason in our communities. Look, this should not be a political issue. This is a health concern issue. We've never debated the value of vaccination for measles, mumps, polio, or hepatitis. What's different now? The conditions, the health conditions, are not what are causing this issue. Politics are. And sadly, here we are debating this from a political perspective rather than a health benefit perspective. And I tell you, as a superintendent, as a father, as a teacher, I am concerned for our kids. They are being used as political pawns in this political chess game, and that is reprehensible.
I'm not going to say that Margaret Brennan's tone was also reprehensible, but I didn't love her agitated tone at him. What is he supposed to be doing? I mean, same thing with Meet the Press and others, Chuck Todd. Is this going to backfire? Is this right? Go ahead. What else could we possibly do to get people vaccinated? All right. And the final clip I have for you is on the California recall. This is CNN's reliable sources, Brian Stelter, talking to Los Angeles Times columnist Gene Guerrero, who is basically saying that Larry Elder, a black man, is a white supremacist, I think.
So you see Larry Elder relying on this big lie, because he understands that the Californians are very likely to reject him as the next governor of California. And the only way that he can sort of explain this loss away is by claiming that it was stolen from him in the same way that Trump claimed of the 2020 election. And he's always been an agent of Trumpism. And I think that reflects that, and it reflects what this recall is about, which is disenfranchising voters and attacking democracy in the way that Republicans have been doing across the country.
You've been such an outspoken critic of Elder. He's well known to right-wing radio listeners as a host for decades, but then he has sparred with the media that's been covering the campaign. He's clearly the leading contender among the Republicans in this recall. So do you think he was able to get around the media and reach voters in California? Was he able to run a Trump playbook in the state?
I mean, kind of. He's essentially been running his campaign on Fox News and on right-wing media outlets. He's refused to talk to large, to nonpartisan and media outlets and to journalists who are critical of him. Has refused to answer difficult questions. Often uses the few interviews that he does give as an opportunity to give a performance on social media. Denouncing those journalists and playing the victim. But he has been able to reach the minority of voters in California who embrace his white supremacist worldview. And he's co-opted this line by my fellow columnist from the headline, calling him the blackface of white supremacy, but he refuses to engage with the actual substance of our reporting. The idea that his views were shaped by a well-known white supremacist named Jared Taylor, who he repeatedly quoted in early writings, that he plans to reverse all of the state's progress on immigrant rights and racial justice, and that he poses a very real threat to communities of color for all of the reasons that we've reported it in the past.
All right, there you go. And I hope everybody in California is voting no. And good luck out there on Tuesday. That's crazy. I'll be very relieved when Gavin Newsom is reelected to the California governor's mansion. Reelected to the mansion? I didn't know what I was supposed to say. All right, that's all the clips I got for you that I've aggregated for you from the weekend. But now it's time to get to the rest of the headlines, which there are many, and what we lovingly call the news dump. Here's a jingle by our own Pete Coe.
Screamy anti-masker Walmart greeter in a huff. He's wrestled to the ground for today's news dump.
Yeah, there you go. Time to do the news. Thank you, Pete. And I just pull back the curtain a little bit here because the first story I'm going to tell you about is the weekend box office numbers. And between the news dump jingle and me starting to talk, I had dinner with my family, and then Ava and I went to a movie. And now I'm back here in the shed finishing up the news. How about that? You would never would have known that, but that's what I actually did. I just pressed pause, went and saw a movie, and that movie won the box office this weekend. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings stayed on top of the box office, collecting $35.8 million in ticket sales in its second weekend, according to studio estimates, as the best second weekend gross of any film during the pandemic, edging out the previous Marvel movie Black Widow. Now, this is also the first time Ava or myself has been to a movie theater. There was like 5 people in the theater, wasn't sitting anywhere near them, and I felt safe and comfortable in that theater. But who knows? Maybe you don't want to take that risk. But we did. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed the movie. And if you like the Marvel films, then I highly recommend this one. Great, great film. All right, so that's headline number 1. Number 2, the FBI on Saturday released first of what is expected to be several documents related to its investigation of the 9/11 terrorist attacks and suspected Saudi government support for the hijackers, following an executive order by President Joe Biden. The newly classified document, which is from 2016, provides details of the FBI's work to investigate the alleged logistical support that a Saudi consular official and a suspected Saudi intelligence agent in Los Angeles provided to at least 2 of the men who hijacked planes on September 11th, 2001. So the plot thickens 20 years later with a Saudi connection, and good for those families for staying on top of the government. They're a well-organized group. The world's oldest male gorilla has COVID. You thought I was going to say he's died. Nope, he has COVID. A dozen others, in addition to him, have also tested positive at a zoo in Atlanta. The coronavirus has overtaken more than a dozen gorillas at Zoo Atlanta, officials say, including the oldest male gorilla in the world. Ozzy's 60-year-old, 350-pound silverback, who's sired 12 gorillas at the zoo, said to be a, quote, terrific father. 12 other Western lowland gorillas have shown presumptive positive test results for COVID, with confirmation expected soon from the National Veterinarian Services Laboratories in Iowa. All right, let's go to North Korea, where apparently they test-fired long-range missiles, officials saying the missiles allegedly hit a target 1,500 kilometers away, and I'm sure we will be hearing more about that in the days and weeks to come. Remember when President Trump, became best friends with the madman from North Korea? I mean, easy to forget stuff, but that was absolutely insane, of course. In upstate New York, a hospital has to stop delivering babies after 30 staffers quit over their vaccine mandate. So I've said that I don't think a lot of these folks will quit, but in certain places they certainly are, and that's pretty messed up. Lewis County Health System, this is in upstate New York, will stop delivering babies later this month after 30 staffers quit in protest of the facility's COVID-19 vaccine mandates. All right, the first openly transgender bishop has been installed in Evangelical Lutheran Church. This is in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America has installed their first openly transgender bishop, according to the Associated Press. The church elected Reverend Megan Rohrer to serve a 6-year term as bishop in May, replacing a bishop who retired. She used the pronoun they and will lead one of the church's 65 synods, overseeing 200 congregations in California and Nevada regions. That's pretty interesting. I thought the Lutherans were a lot more conservative than that. What do I know? Well, this morning I got up early and walked out to get the Sunday New York Times, which lands on my driveway, and I saw a giant, what looked like a bee. It looked huge. It had 2 yellow stripes on it. It was like the size of a bird. It was following me around, scared the shit out of me. I was like, is that a murder hornet? It's not. I've seen them dead, and I identified one once, but I forget what the species is. However, the second murder hornet nest of the year has been eradicated in Washington state. The year's third nest has been located in the same area, according to the Washington State Department of Agriculture. The first Asian giant hornet's nest of the year was eradicated late last month. I think I reported it here on the show. And the nest consists of 9 layers of comb and had almost 1,500 hornets in various stages of development. Staff vacuumed 113 worker hornets for the nest, in addition to catching 67 additional hornets with nets in the area. Good job to all the people who do that work. The hornets earned the murder hornet nickname because they enter a slaughter phase, where they kill bees by decapitating them, according to officials. They natively live in a region from northern India to East Asia. They prey on honeybees and other insects, and some hornets can destroy a hive in just hours. The hornet, considered invasive in the United States, first reported in the Vancouver Island area in Canada in August 2019, and so it still remains only in the Pacific Northwest, but good work on all the people tracking that. And let's stick with nature and talk about squirrels. A new study saying squirrels have personalities too. Not just as many as humans, just not as many as humans, a new study reveals. These are these kind of studies I'm not sure about, but anyway, I like it, so who cares? A new study finds that friendly squirrels staring at you in the park has a personality just like humans. Researchers from University of California, Davis, say these characteristics range from aggressive to social or polite to careful or shy. So next time you see a squirrel, think of your pal Pete telling you that they got personalities. And let me know. Take a picture and send it my way, and then tell me what personality you think they have. That'll be fun. And speaking of fun, here's the final story I'm going to share with you. I love this guy. There's a guy who is on tour. His name is Alex Schwartz, and his entire mission is to test hundreds of apple cider donuts, which I myself love this time of year. Can't wait for the cinnamon sugar dusted dream. And he is going to taste and review every fresh apple cider donut he can get his hands on. His name, like I said, is Alex Schwartz. He's got an Instagram page. I'm reading this at NPR. But it's Cider Donateur, like entrepreneur, Cider Donateur. And he's got 6,700 followers on Instagram, and I love it. Following now. All right, that is the end of the news dump, and now it's time to get to my first guest. She is joins me every Monday now that we can make it work, and she is the executive director of Tax March, which is an awesome nonprofit working to raise taxes on the wealthy and create fair tax policy in our country, taxmarch.org. She's also a very talented writer who's been published in The New Yorker and McSweeneys and so many other places. She's absolutely hilarious in the written form as well. And she's amazing on Twitter. She's a big deal on Twitter, at Behind Your Back. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Maura Mondays with Maura Quint. Let's do it. Okay, it's Monday, and that means we get the great honor to talk to Maura Quint. Maura, welcome to the Maura Mondays, which we've branded after you because you're here every Monday, and we now have a jingle intro for you. I haven't heard it. I purposely have not heard it. Pete
really?
Yep. Are you ready?
Oh boy, I'm terrified.
Here we go.
When life's a glass of horse paste, it's Maura Mondays.
When life is a glass of horse paste, it's Maura Mondays. How do you feel? Do you want give notes and maybe we can come up with something new?
I mean, it's very topical, so you know that works. That's very good for the moment. I don't know if it's going to carry over and continue. Right. I think in a year it's going to be really confusing.
Right.
But I like it very much.
It's not evergreen, but knowing Pete, he'll write one every week. But,
oh my gosh!
But yes,
I feel very honored.
Exactly.
Deeply honored.
It's very fun to have your own branded segment with a jingle intro. That's awesome.
Someone has to teach me how to make that my ringtone because I have no idea how to change that sort of thing. Oh my God,
we're doing it. Yeah, but then you have to think of horse paste every time someone calls you. So
it's okay. That's already what happens. So that makes sense.
Before I talk to you, I always love to go through your Twitter feed because it's so great. You're so awesome on Twitter, and you shared a photo of a salad that you had at a nice restaurant in Minnesota, and I want to attack you.
Okay.
There's a lot of berries, all the berries, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's vegetables like lettuce and so on. And so my question to you is, who hurt you?
So, okay. I was at brunch at this place that everyone on the internet told me I had to go, that I would never have found on my own in Duluth, Minnesota. I had to wait an hour to get into this place. It was a big deal. And it was brunch. I got an omelet, and it said pick a side. They had like sweet potato hash or something. They had a bunch of different sides. I wasn't feeling well. There was one called berry salad. I assumed that was just like a fruit salad with berries. That's what I thought I was going to get. And yeah, it was a bunch of greens with berries on top, with granola on top of that. And then some sort of like a weird like dill dressing. And it was the best thing I have ever eaten ever. And I want it all the time. And I need to know how to replicate it.
Have you put strawberries on your salads before? Do you do that yourself?
I mean, I know that's like strawberries on the salad. I don't love that. I don't love berries on salads.
You're a sociopath. By the way,
no, this was good. I'm telling you. I also would have turned up my nose if I had known what was going to come in it. And I'm telling you, it was fantastic, and everyone should eat it immediately.
For the record, I'm turning down my nose at you.
I feel very passionately about this salad, Pete.
Well, every time I pursue this line of attack, I find out I'm alone. Like, I don't know. I think it's funny to make fun of people for mixing fruit and vegetables, but like most people think I'm a maniac for even going there. So I'm sure I've lost everybody, and you've won everybody over.
I don't tend to love it. Like, it's not my favorite thing, really. It's not. This was phenomenal.
You also
Can we just talk about food? That's all I want to talk about.
Well, I kind of wanted to as well, because you also had an amazing looking Bloody Mary, which sometimes, like, I feel like a Bloody Mary, if you see a photo of a Bloody Mary, you really want to make one. I think that's true probably of a lot of things, but something about, like, I just saw that just now and I'm dying for one.
That also just might be your mental state at the moment.
That's probably true too. But I'm not drinking this week or smoking pot this week, and I'll get into that later. But
well, that's even worse then. Yeah. Now I'm just teasing you with a Bloody Mary. That's terrible.
I'm cleansing.
Although I will say Bloody Marys are one of the few drinks where it doesn't really suffer to take the vodka out. Like, you're still going to enjoy it. It's actually still really quite pleasant.
That's a good point. If you stick all those things in it, which were like in yours, you had like a pickle and I think there was a sailboat There was quite a few.
There was like a giant pig, basically, like a whole hunk of meat, like just
really?
raw. That's what it seemed like. And then,
I'm okay.
It was Minnesota, so it was some sort of giant amount of cheese. I don't know what kind of cheese it was, but it was also phenomenal cheese. It was a really good brunch.
Okay, so staying on food for one more question. This is fun. When was the last time, I'll put you on the spot, it might be hard, that you were at an event, someone's house? I mean, you were at a wedding, so maybe that's an example, but where someone else made you a meal and you were like, ooh, not a fan, but you had to go ahead with it anyway. That has happened quite a bit to me, and I can't think of one off the top of my head. Do you ever have that happen? Or do you eat everything?
No, I don't. I'm annoying, but I will eat everything vegetarian. Like, I'm just really picky about meat. So I just tend to tell people I'm vegetarian, and then anything you serve me, I'll be totally happy with. It's when people try to serve me like meat and things. And the thing that came to mind, this was a while ago. I used to work in nonprofit fundraising, which I hated and I was very bad at. But I was invited to a dinner with some very high-end donors, and it was something that like most people would love, but it was like just seafood, which I don't eat. But I couldn't sit there and like try to ask these people for money and be like, ew, I don't like your food. So I sat there and just sort of choked down food I did not enjoy.
You don't eat any, you don't like seafood?
I just don't tend to like it. Although, go ahead, sorry.
Well, what's the meat thing?
Oh, I have been a vegetarian in my life, but I'll eat chicken now and some other meat, but I just don't tend to really enjoy it. It's not my favorite thing. No. And, so I try not to eat it too much.
Do you ever worry, get insecure when you tell people that you don't like certain things, like a whole genre, like seafood? Is that, do people get surprised, and do you worry about their judgment?
If I say I don't really like seafood, yes, I'm going to have a whole conversation. If I say to someone I'm a vegetarian, no conversation. Like, that's just accepted. So like, that's how I avoid that, like, it's so easy because they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a thing. We accept that. That's fine. I don't like something is like, what? Why not? You haven't had it this way. Let me just do it. And then it's like a whole thing. That
made me think of an example. It just happened. My friend Dan McDonald, who probably is listening, I picked up my daughter who babysits for him, and he said he gave her and us like a bag of like pecan cupcakes or something. They look
you're
great.
A pecan guy. Okay.
I'm not. So
not pecan, Sorry, I was just talking about the pronunciation. I'm running us completely off rails.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Some stuff.
I say pecan.
Pecan. Okay. That's just very, I don't hear a lot of people going pecan. Most people go pecan.
Well, I'm from Syracuse.
I don't
know what that means. Just was supposed to throw you off. You're like, okay. So anyway, he's like, you got to try these. And I was like, oh, I'm allergic to pecans. See what he did? And he's like, oh, okay. And I go, I'm not. I don't like pecans. And he goes, my mother-in-law made these. And it made me feel like so much worse because like they were baked by a person,
Yeah.
But
you were literally spitting in the face of his mother-in-law.
Yeah,
just
I don't know what to tell you.
Hawking it up. Yeah.
I don't like a lot of nuts being cooked. I don't know what that says about me, but
it's the only time you don't like nuts.
What are you saying?
Nothing at all.
You're saying I love balls?
I mean,
I think that's what you're saying.
It might be what I'm saying. Yeah.
We have you on the record saying you like to crush balls about 4 episodes ago. So don't start with me.
I'm so glad that's coming back up. This is nice.
But just a reminder, that's a thing that some men like. They like to have their balls. That disgusts me.
I love that you're asking me like I'm the authority on ball crushing.
Well, you're a woman, and you're a heterosexual woman.
It's true. That much is true.
You've been with men.
You me there. I can't avoid that.
So I would ask a gay man this question too, but I've never heard of such a thing. I don't understand these. I don't understand certain kinks. I
think there's like, I think in general, some people have different sort of like, they like to lean into pain a little bit, right? Like there are different levels of pain that can be kind of arousing and erotic. And so I just think that falls under that sort of category.
I don't, though. I think slapping and choking might, but ball crushing sounds... Okay, moving on. I can't even talk about it.
Back to the Bloody Marys. Get a couple Bloody Marys in you, and then we'll get back to ball crushing.
I really I want to do a podcast solely dedicated to this behavior of ball crushing. So if anybody listening knows anything about it, and if any man enjoys it, I'd like to reach out and interview you anonymously. So, to 9/11, because why not?
Sure.
It's nine.
Crushing.
It's nine.
Let's just talk about hopes and dreams.
20 years. I'm really, this year I was like, I don't know, maybe it's because it fell on a weekend and it's easier to look away from because I'm not covering it for the show or something, but I just couldn't this time, Maura. And I don't even really want to talk about it. I just like, it was 20 years, Afghanistan withdrawal being very symbolic. And I don't know. I just didn't want to think about it this year. I usually don't, but especially this year. How did you think about it or deal with it if you did at all?
No, I felt very much the same. I think I generally avoided it. I mean, I do always, I have to say, sort of like darkly enjoy the fact that we have this national tragedy and this huge Memorial Day. And it does kind of tickle me a little bit that brands are so desperate. They know it's happening. They know it's happening. Everyone's going to be facing in that direction, and everything in their bodies tell them that they should then be part of it in some way. And I love that they just can't. There's no way for them to do that and have it work. You can't run a sale. You can't somehow put out a greeting card that's going to make it. There's not a half off, candy heart, but with you can't do any of that. But they want to so badly. And that entertains me a little bit, but that's it. The only other element, I mean, I did have to reckon with a bit this year is that my kids are now learning about it. Right. And so they asked me a little bit about it, and was a difficult conversation, kind of an interesting one. It was hard for them to comprehend.
I'm sure you just told them they attacked us for our freedoms.
What I said was, look, there was a day when some terrible things happened, and afterwards we had to rename French fries, and that's all I gave them. That's it.
They're like, oh, okay, well, yeah,
yeah, okay.
That's a good point. That's a really good point for just general discussion as to when your kids kind of lose their innocence, or when they can comprehend, and when it's appropriate to talk about anything from death to terrorism to any of that, and that's tough for every parent, I suppose. And when watching your kids kind of lose their innocence, the first time they see those videos, you're probably not with them. I mean, I think they see them in school or elsewhere, but it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, they came home they wanted to ask me that their teachers were telling them there were heroes, and they wanted to know what the heroes did. And so that's where I had to, my first thought of heroes was the United 93 flight. And so trying to explain the individuals on that flight and how they, ultimately sacrificed themselves, to stop from a greater harm. So I, tried to explain that as best I could, but there's no way to give there's not euphemisms there, really, too many that you can really use to paper over it. So I tried to be pretty direct, but it was strange.
It dominated last night. I rarely turn on the TV. I use YouTube TV, but seeing the networks were mostly running specials, it seemed, and then sports all have a thing. The Mets were playing Yankees, and they had their FDNY and their NYPD, and then I think the college, a lot of the Army and Navy at least ran out with the American flags, and so in terms of it's not a sale, but it is in your you can't get away from it if you turn on your TV. I think I
did have to buy a washing machine, and no one offered me any 9/11 discounts. So
did you really have to buy a washing machine?
I really did have to buy a washing machine. Yeah. It sucked. I hated it.
I'm surprised you did. Maybe you did, but I'm surprised that you didn't tweet recommendations. That's the kind of thing you ask people. You don't have to do. That's what I love about Twitter and Facebook, especially. And I'm serious. I don't want to do any research. And the research is the replies to your question. When you have a media, moderate following, much less a huge following like you, people are going to tell you you're going to have 7,000 replies on what washer you should get.
It's my favorite thing to do when I'm traveling. I mean, people are so incredibly friendly and helpful, and I love that there, especially if they live there, they really want to tell you the stuff that they really love. It's the best. I thought about tweeting about washing machines, and basically just the idea of having to prolong a discussion about washing machines just sounded so terrible that I was like, oh God, I can't read the replies. I can't have to spend more time thinking about everything about it just makes me so bummed out. You
did, though, ask for recommendation for a restaurant when you're in Minnesota. And
yes.
It seemed like that. Did you go to a restaurant based on something that somebody told you on Twitter?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
cool.
salad that you want to mock was absolutely the recommendation of several people from Twitter.
They recommended that specific salad? They're like, oh,
no, they recommended the place, Pete. They didn't tell me to get the salad.
Wow,
salad was great, though, and I'm telling everyone to get the salad.
Talk about the fucking sociopaths that follow you as well. I am interested in your take on the argument that is happening, the conversation that's happening, and I think reasonable people can disagree, although I know how I feel, and I'll tell you after I get your reply. But like this idea that after, as long as we've been dealing with COVID and the pandemic, and that at this point, dismissing, being rude, or mocking the anti-vaxxers is either acceptable and appropriate, or, you know what, the Jake Tappers of the world and other, I think, reasonable people saying, you know what, that's not effective at changing hearts and minds. Mocking them isn't effective. And I wonder if you agree one way or the other, or somewhere in between, or have thoughts on that.
I mean, I think probably mocking them is not super effective. I think telling them science doesn't really seem to be super effective. Having reasonable conversations doesn't seem to be really effective. Mandating things doesn't really seem to be very effective. Yeah, it's probably not the way you're going to get the outliers or the, extreme people to change their mind. That's probably true. Very little seems to be the way that we're going to reach those people. And I don't think that we have come up with a systemic response that's going to be effective. So in the meantime, yeah, I want to mock them. Fuck them. I don't, there's so many people that are in such peril because of those people. They are endangering their fellow citizens. And I think a lot of people are walking around with a lot of anger and frustration and terror and fear because the world right now is unsafe for young children who can't get vaccinated, for people who are immunocompromised and can't get vaccinated, and other things. And so if people want to mock the jerks who are holding the rest of the country hostage out of their own, out of a lot of reasons, but I don't really have a problem with them using that outlet because there's not a lot of good options right now.
I think I mostly agree with you except for mandates. I think we don't know if they're going to work because we've just started to implement. Yeah. And I think they will work. Like there's this thing over the weekend. I saw some asshole made a video and it was shared by some other asshole who had a huge following, where he was like saying that a whole bunch of that the Department of Defense is mandating vaccines and a bunch of F-22 pilots walked off the job. Didn't happen. Yeah. Not true. Right. Didn't happen. I reacted to that by saying the left gets things wrong all the time. They try to connect dots that aren't there. They do a lot. But I feel like we, generally speaking, don't completely make shit up and then have prominent people share it. And that's what happens a lot on the right. And that's neither here nor there, as much as the fact that I think mandates, I don't know, I could very well be wrong, but I think most people, some people, but most people are not going to leave their career. If they're a nurse, if they're a pilot, if they have, a job that required a lot of education and they've been doing for a long time, they're actually probably just going to get the vaccine, especially now when it's been fully approved by the FDA. That's my thought. I think the mandates will work to a large extent, but...
No, I think you're absolutely right. I was definitely being glib, and you've rubbed my face on it appropriately. Well, I do. I agree.
You might be right, but I feel like it hasn't really been implemented fully yet.
No, I think there has been some proof to show that mandates do increase participation, definitely. So, I think that is right. Like I said, I was being very glib because there's not a lot, but it might be incredibly effective. So. I will withhold my judgment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. Certainly with schools. It's weird. I watched one of the Sunday shows. The governor of Nebraska was, Chris Wallace, nails him. Is like, why are you okay with vaccines for all these other things being mandated, but this one is socialism in like the Soviet Union, which is what he compared it to.
Yeah.
And his answer was, well, it's not been around for a long time. People have a lot of questions. I hate people have a lot of questions about the election. People have a lot of questions about climate change. Well, the people who are experts don't have a lot of questions. The reason people have questions is because assholes are creating all kinds of conspiracies and questions. The reason why people have questions about the election is because the president of the United States, the former, gave them those questions.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The heads of that these individuals are looking to are going out of their way to purposefully mislead and lie to them on a regular basis. And that is absolutely where the ire should be put over and over.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you, did you hear that they're at the NFL is playing like a black national anthem as well as did you hear that?
No.
Well, I don't,
is that a real thing? That doesn't sound like a real thing.
Yeah, I haven't really thought through it. But the NFL has gone they've done everything but allow Colin Kaepernick to play.
Right.
And at this point, maybe he wouldn't actually. He's 1 year older. But anyway, we don't have to talk about it if you haven't heard about that. But Bill Maher went crazy on it, and I was just like,
I try to avoid anything that Bill Maher says in general. Yeah. I just sort of I avoid him like I was avoiding 9/11.
He's so influential. So many people are so influential, and what they
is he still? I mean, I really don't know. I'm actually that's an actual question. I
think
truly
so.
do not know.
I think so because he is an independent thinker and very unpredictable, and where he comes down on some things, on a lot of things, and I think people respect him for that. But then people don't respect him for all the terrible takes that he has as well. So, I think he's lost credibility more than he's gained it over the years, certainly with the left. But I don't know. A lot of people.
I have no idea. I don't know anyone who watches his show anymore, and I do know people who fall sort of in the mold. But I'm like surprised. I'm constantly surprised that he still has a show because I truly do not know anyone who watches it, and I know people who watch terrible things.
Oh, I watch it every week.
Do you really?
Yeah,
now I know someone.
I like the format. I don't like most of the people, but I do like the format where it's just kind of completely uncensored, and he often gets. I mean, I don't know that I learn anything from it, but he often gets a crazy person on, along with a normal person, and they kind of I don't know. I think it's a different type of conversation than you hear most places. I still think that.
Okay, all right. I'm canceling you now, but no problem.
I mean, every single friend of mine of pretty much of color or especially Muslims hate him, and I understand that for sure.
Seems fair.
Speaking of which, I did see back to 9/11, a lot of different people talk, you talk about unity after 9/11, and that's a very white thing, apparently.
Yeah, of course.
Like brown people, especially Muslims, did not feel, they were more scared than they'd ever been as Americans. They didn't feel unity. And there's some really good columns I did see about that. So I do think that's important to discuss. That unity after 9/11 wasn't for everybody.
No, it was a very, very specific kind. And I don't people talk about that, but I don't remember feeling unity. I don't mean to say that I wasn't included or wouldn't have been embraced in the unity. I'm sure I probably would have because of the way that I look, but I don't remember necessarily feeling that. I remember much more of the tension and the sort of join or die kind of unity, right? Like you have to,
I definitely remember being a New Yorker. There were a few weeks where people were very pleasant with each other, but I do think it matters, and now as well, that you acknowledge the vessel that you're traveling through life in. And I think that probably a lot of white folks and black folks and Hispanic folks, men and women, probably did feel that. But I'm guessing anybody who looked even Muslim-y, including the Sikh who was murdered while he's planting flowers in front of his workplace, did not feel that. They felt like they were suspects. And so that's what I think it matters who you were if you felt that is probably the case. I don't know. People just weren't as rude as they normally were in New York for a few weeks. Is, I think, the deal. That's my recollection.
That's one of those things too, though, that I always find I've never lived in New York. I've gone to New York and visited New York every year of my life, basically, missing a couple of years. But I've never felt New York was rude ever. I just never felt that. But again, the vessel I travel in. But I also even just mean observationally, even just now, I went to New York a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, whatever it was, a couple months ago. Yeah. And I watched these 20 something dudes carry up a wheelchair up the stairs out of the subway for, a homeless person of color. And they were chatting and it wasn't, it just seemed very friendly and pleasant. And it was just I've seen a lot of that kind of just sort of pitch in and help each other stuff.
Yeah, and I thought you were gonna. I thought you were gonna talk about the woman who returned your wallet, which was also.
Gosh, yeah, that's
no,
all
I agree with you. By the way, like I think that I used to do a joke about it in my act. I think I can't remember it, but that New Yorkers are really, super nice unless, and in most cases, they're trying to get somewhere, and you're in the way.
Well, sure,
but for the most part, really not. A lot of people say hello and make eye contact, and if you need any help or any directions, people are always, generally happy. I think New Yorkers are pretty nice, but the problem is people are, so highfalutin or everybody's trying to get somewhere that sometimes, that's where I think the rudeness comes out. But if you're just sitting around or something and all things are equal, everybody's really pleasant.
I think people are just so used to being surrounded by humanity that it's not surprising. And so they're a little more open to it. There are plenty of places in the world where you're not used to being surrounded by humanity. And there's a lot more suspicion and fear and people withdraw from it and aren't very friendly about it. So, yeah.
I wanted to get your take today on where you think things are in terms of congressional negotiations with this huge, bill that is,
reconciliation.
You've been tweeting about Joe Manchin and he has just got so power. And I don't know, some of the criticism of Democrats, like my friend Jason Johnson has talked about, there's a lot of people, criticizing Biden, and they're saying what other past presidents have done and how to twist somebody's arm and, or give them whatever they want. And I actually don't think there's much anyone can do to change Joe Manchin's mind. And I don't think that there's a Democrat that would replace him. So you can't primary him. A lot of people talk about that. But I also think, according to my friend Michael Cohen, who was on last week, he's just posturing and he's going to do it for a little while longer. And then he's not going to shoot down Joe Biden's entire presidency. So what are your thoughts on the reality of the politics of getting Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who doesn't get enough criticism maybe because of him, and what needs to get done? And is there anything other than these two senators and the filibuster that should be talked about?
I mean, there's plenty, I think, to be talked about, but they are the ones, taking up the most oxygen at the moment. And I on a personal level, hate Sinema much more than I hate Manchin, although trust me, I hate them both. But there's just more. Sinema, I feel like I know who that person is, and I just dislike that person greatly. Manchin is, he's a little bit more I think people don't quite know what to do for him. He obviously has these, intense corporate interests that obviously are influencing him, and that he, cares to protect. And that's infuriating. But we have seen him raise these kinds of objections before and then ultimately get in line. So I understand why there are individuals who are saying that, oh, that's what's going to happen here. I don't think we should take it as a given. I don't think it's sure, that's definitely what's going to happen. I think he's going to need to be pressured a lot. I think he might be pressurable, though. I don't think he's, at a definite, he's not going to get on board. I think he can be pushed. I think certainly we need to try. And I really, really fucking hate that guy. I hate him so much.
All right. Well, I had a major technical difficulty. I'm jumping in here. Unfortunately, I had to end my conversation with Maura because I'm having some hardware issues here with my mixing board. You're going to hear it again a little bit on my conversation with my next guest, Anya, as well. But you heard that fuzz there at the end, so I couldn't figure it out in time to finish. But so sorry about that. Sorry to be have an abrupt ending. That's never fun. But great conversation with Maura. Let her know you heard it at Maura Quint. Thanks to the new jingle from Pete Coe. And now let me pivot to my second guest of today's show. Anya Kamanetz is the education correspondent for NPR. Really smart woman. I've always loved talking to her. She is also a author. She's written now 4 books. She's working on her 4th book coming out next year, next August, I think. But if you're a parent who hasn't bought her book, The Art of Screen Time, we touch on it a little bit, came out, I think, in 2018. Yeah, that's right. Now out in paperback with a new preface for the pandemic. It's essential don't panic guide to kids, parenting, and screens. So get that now. And I always love talking to her. She's got her new book, will be out next year, about the lost year of school for students. It's excellent. Sounds excellent. We talked a lot about that. And she also is doing a new project that will help any parents and teachers To find out more about that, go to getchapter.app or follow Anya on Twitter at Anya1Anya, A-N-Y-A, the number 1, A-N-Y-A. She's awesome on Twitter and, of course, on NPR. But we've got her today on Stand Ups. And like I said, little technical difficulty. I changed from the Zoom or StreamYard app that I use to the phone, but I think you'll hear the fuzz come in, and then I immediately hung up and called her and edited it out. So it's a great conversation. Let's do it. Okay, I'm very excited. I've just told you all about her, and I've been a big fan of her work because I learned so much from her work, her reporting, her books, and I wish I could talk to you every week for hours as we all go through these things and try to navigate these things, because you are such a resource. Anya, welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me for a back-to-school chat, I guess.
Pete, thank you for having me back. The fandom is definitely mutual.
Well, so let me just get to a couple quick headlines with you to get your reactions to them. Things that we knew were going to happen, speculated, well, pretty sure would happen, and now we got some news on them. One is that one of the biggest school districts in the country is at Los Angeles is mandating vaccines for students, and the other one is that NIH is saying that they may have vaccines available for kids 5 to 12, for Pfizer by Halloween, for Moderna by Thanksgiving, which is really interesting. But let's just first start at the school mandate thing in conjunction with, it's very confusing. You had the president talking about mandates, but that was about federal employees, I guess. And so what does it mean that a huge school district is mandating this vaccine like all the rest?
Like all the rest is right. I mean, this is huge. This is the path forward to normalizing our way out of the pandemic, not just for schools, but for everybody. I mean, as you mentioned, when you enroll your kid in school, when I enrolled my kid in school, they had to see that vaccination card because that is how we stop infectious diseases from rampaging through the population. And so, this vaccine is new. We're still learning about it. But Los Angeles, it's interesting because LAUSD, the second largest district in the country, was no paragon of dealing with the pandemic in the last school year. They stayed closed for so long, and they left so many students out in the cold that way. All of California did. California was really, would not a profile in courage, okay, right, in terms of serving kids. But here they are, and because of that hardline stance, in a way, California has been very hardline in terms of restrictions on COVID, and and they have the case numbers. Some parts of California are better than others. LA has been very bad at times, but whatever combination of factors, local factors, that allowed them to come out in front and say, yeah. And Culver City, by the way, I believe was the very first one in the country to do it back in August. So that's basically greater LA, and now we have LAUSD and President Biden, this is, the day after that the day before we're talking, gave a speech and basically is begging states to do the same thing that LA is doing. So are we going to see similar policies play out as it relates to the politics of their state? Are blue states and big city districts generally going to be more likely to pass these mandates, and some of these other school states less likely? Do you have any reporting on that or any knowledge? I mean, I would imagine that's what they're going to do based on the pressure, the Board of Education and what jurisdiction they have. So here's what's so interesting. Our districts, our schools are locally controlled. They're not state controlled, and they're not federally controlled. There's 13,000 something school districts. And they have very strong relationships with their communities. And so you see in states like Florida and states like Texas, where basically the governors are pro-COVID, right? They are trying to ban mask mandates. They're trying to stop schools from offering remote learning. They're saying, we're not going to give you money to offer remote learning. The individual districts are going against that. So Miami-Dade County, Alachua, Broward counties in Florida are defying the governor to say, we do want masks in our schools. We want to follow the science here. We have our kids' lives in our hands, and we can't be responsible for this. And so now we have the president stepping in, and this is so fascinating. This is like, I don't want to oversell it, but like Brown versus Board of Education, like this is a time where, okay, the federal government is backing up and pushing against what states want to do in terms of, but in this case, you have the local districts, for the most part, really want to do the right thing.
Right.
Which is follow the science.
Right.
And the president, Biden, is saying, if your state takes away your money and takes the superintendent's salary away, which is something that's being threatened in some states, we, the federal government, are going to step up and backfill your salaries, backfill your budget.
Yeah, you wrote a great piece about that at NPR, explaining how that works, and it's interesting to hear it. To hear you compare it to Brown v. Board of Education. It's a fascinating and terrifying time watching these schools and these governments fight. I keep thinking about this one example. I don't know if you should have emailed this to give you some time to think about it, but I keep thinking about schools and parents being overcautious and trying to have all kinds of safety regulations and I can't think of an example where the government, local or state, came in and said, you can't do that safety measure.
Yeah.
We don't want you to have that security layer at the doors or on the buses, the Bunsen burners. When is there any precedent for the government saying you can't practice what you think is the safest thing to do in your building?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is when Texas, again, allowed open carry on college campuses.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another thing, right, where it's basic safety versus somebody's idea of freedom.
I am trying to work with the kind of right-wing influential guy in my town to try to get him to agree on being pro-vaccine, to influence people on it, so we don't have to argue about masks. But maybe it's not that binary. I feel like I'm very much, if we see vaccine mandates, we won't have to argue as much about the masks. Is that fair?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to wear masks.
Right.
Everybody wants to be safe from COVID. I think it's important. I just came back from 4 months of book leave. So I had the luxury of kind of sitting back a little bit and coming back into it now. What strikes me is that, fundamentally, everybody's just so tired of this pandemic and everybody wants to get back to normal. And everybody just has a really different vision of what normal means. And for some people, it means I never have to wear a mask or I can just pretend it doesn't exist. And for other people, it means I can relax when everyone gets vaccinated and I can finally, we can put this behind us. But that's it's dividing communities, not just along political lines. It's dividing families, it's dividing friends.
Yep. Absolutely. It's a pretty stark line and pretty easy to find out what people think or feel about it. In my BOE meeting 2 weeks ago, it was crazy. I got shouted down. I've never been at a microphone and gotten heckled so badly in my life.
Wow.
And I turned tail and ran too, Anya. I was like, I'm scared of you people. I knew I wasn't on stage at a comedy club, so I couldn't fight back. I really wanted to. I was just like, I'm going to get out of here. So you mentioned book leave, your book, which comes out about a year from now, I guess. You have a date.
Right.
It's called The Stolen Year, How America's COVID Response Failed Children and How We Can Fix It. You've been working on this for several months now, and everybody has their own anecdotes about what happened to their school-age kid or didn't happen. Mine is that my kids got perfect grades because there was no such thing as not looking up or sharing the answer with your friends at all times. Aren't colleges even throwing away looking at academics that year is just all not really a good measurement of anything?
Well, when the tide goes out, you can see who has their pants on, right? These measures, these artificial measures we were using that were meaningless around student learning, like standardized testing, ended up not being useful. And schools that didn't build meaningful relationships with their students had very little chance of keeping them engaged over a computer screen. So I never want to be a person to declare silver linings. People are really suffering. Nobody wanted a pandemic.
Right.
At the same time, for educators that are so passionate about their work, I see some level of, okay, my God, we can finally have a conversation about the things that are really important, like meeting every kid where they are and getting to know the whole person and and like a stronger relationship between families and schools.
Sorry, to be clear, you're saying what the pandemic created was a lack of teaching and prepping for tests and more of what kind of should be done.
I mean, tests were canceled in spring of 2020. They occurred to some extent. These are the state tests in 2021, but really limited. And the value of that information was much less because we didn't know exactly who was taking the tests. And schools, colleges really threw out the window the SAT and ACT requirements. There's a lot more like most schools in the country are now test optional, which is major.
Wow.
So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, more than half of the colleges in the country.
I hate it.
Do not require you.
My daughter is, she's a junior, 16, and so we've gone on a few college visits, and we're talking about it. And I shit on these tests so much to her, but at the same time, I'm like, these tests suck, but you got to get a good grade on them if you want to get into a good school. Sorry, work around. You got to work within the system, I suppose. In your research for your book, I wonder, how much you even want to talk about it yet, but I always felt like a lot of sympathy for administrators, even that had never been through anything like this. There's not probably anything in their master's programs about how to deal with a pandemic, much less remote learning, and certainly the teachers and obviously the parents and the students. But did some districts do a much, much better job than others? Was there any kind of template for districts to follow? Because I really did have a lot of patience for our administration trying to figure this all out.
It's really a map of inequality in America, right? Because school districts, the ideal kind of place to be. I remember talking to a district leader in like suburban Chicago, right? And families have moved there specifically to go to those schools. And there's maybe like small four figures, like an average size district in the country, like 2,000 students or something. And they're like, oh yeah, we just split up everybody into A and B group. And like the first group attends in the morning and they have their core classes. And then they come home, and they have art and PE on the computer. And then they switch and nobody has to have lunch at school.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were districts certainly that were smaller, tended to be better resourced with stronger community relationships. And, it really all came down to trust and management. And a lot of those, at the end, of course, you don't want to be into politicized or into politically polarized a community. I mean, it's very odd to say, but political polarization, the degree to which a district was full of Trump voters, was the number one factor in which schools opened their doors last year. And some of them were relatively conflict free because everybody agreed that schools should be open. Where the districts that were mostly staying closed, I think there was a little more angst and back and forth. But the ones that were like trying for it and going hybrid and had their community's trust, fared okay. Like Wyoming had all their schools open, I think by the May of 2020 almost. It's like a big rural state.
But I feel like the first thing you said is the most important thing. If my question is how do different districts cope and handle it and succeed and fail, and you said, well, it's a map of inequality.
That is the most important thing. You're absolutely right. And for so many reasons, Pete. I mean, what I go through in the book is kind of like, because I go through the year and obviously, March shut down and then like reeling from that. And then June, we had George Floyd and we had this huge confrontation at the end of May, actually. And the history of how Black and brown communities in this country perceive their public schools and interact with their public schools and how those schools interact with them. So that's why Brown versus Board of Ed is so much top of mind for me, because everybody tells that story. Everybody loves the story of school integration and kind of like, look at little Ruby Bridges. It was just her birthday, by the way. Ruby Bridges, she's only 67 years old. She's younger than my mom.
Oh my God. It's crazy. But I am going to push back on not everybody loved integrate. Still, like, it's weird. People are still, maybe, sadly. Go ahead.
So we're going to set aside, yes, there are avowed racists and have always been. But there are also white liberals who love to congratulate themselves about what a great job we did,
right?
And how great we all came off,
right?
Integrating the schools, right? You never think like, oh, I would have been one of those people spitting in the faces of someone as they walked in the school,
right?
But what we kind of like edit out is just what hell that was, what racial terrorism it was, and what scars it left on communities that, as soon as those communities showed up in those schools, the schools got defunded, everybody left. And they were left with, they no longer had Black teachers. When they were in segregated schools, they had Black teachers. They teachers that understood them. They came from the community. Oftentimes, the teachers were overeducated because they couldn't get out of their jobs. And the quality of education that they were getting in the pre-Brown schools, it wasn't always an upgrade. And the feeling was not that we're being embraced. And so when you come around to this kind of confrontation where the schools are open and then they're saying, they're closed, and then they're saying, oh, we're going to open them again and we promise they'll be fine. A lot of people are just like, no, I don't believe you.
Well, I mean, there's some credence to that because school administrations have been all over the place because this virus has been all over the place, and the issues around all the guidance have been all over the place. There's just so much confusion, and that decreases credibility, I suppose, and trust between the community and the district. I keep thinking though about when the pandemic broke out and they all started to figure out what remote learning would look like, and schools that had computers already could hand them out, but a lot of teachers, much as students, didn't know how to sign in and all that stuff. But more importantly, there's like internet issues, and so whether it be in people without computers but a good internet connection, or people that both, like I think about kind of rural areas didn't even have like internet. So if you're living in a poor area, in a rural area, how are students, how much of an issue was the technology not working, even if the teacher knew how to use it and the child could learn from it? How much of it is just not accessible?
It was a major issue all throughout the year. It affected more than half of families below the median income. They had some kind of issue. And that ranged a lot. I mean, just the fact of having more people in one household, just the noise, right? Like I talked to a 16-year-old girl. She's supervising remote learning for half a dozen kids that she lives with because she left home and she's living with her best friend. Her best friend has a kid. So there are like 6 kids that she watches because all the other adults are working, and she's getting them on their Zooms. And the Zooms are freezing because the Wi-Fi was never intended to handle that many simultaneous kids. I mean, no matter, that's in the urban area, but yeah, in the rural areas, it's a joke. That's why you heard, and it happened. So many kids were in the parking lots of Taco Bells and Paneras trying to get their schoolwork done.
I feel like maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention to your reporting or somebody else's, but I feel like I just didn't hear that much about those things. But I knew they were happening. I heard a little bit about it, but I also think I didn't want to hear about that. It was too much to imagine because my kids did fine. Mm-hmm. And I hated thinking about other people's kids and how challenging that whole situation was. But so much more to talk about your book. I can't wait to read it. The Stolen Year, How America's COVID Response Failed Children and How We Can Fix It. All of your books are amazing. I can't wait to see this and learn. You're one of these guests and one of these reporters that your reporting directly affects me, directly affects people. and your new, I love your tiny letter, which I subscribe to, and everybody should subscribe to it. And now you're doing this, launching this new initiative with this chapter app where people can learn even more. But one of the things that you really help us do is aggregate all of the science and research on a thing, from obviously your book Screen Time, where we can talk about how that's changed, but right down to masks and masking. And it's such a great resource. Talk a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish and what the feedback has been on your newsletter and this new initiative.
Yeah, so the newsletter, like you said, is tiny letter, and thank you so much for reading it. I don't know how you do all the things that you do, but
there's everybody. There's a lot of people to subscribe to on foreign policy or politics or even like something like parenting. But you kind of are in this smaller lane or specific lane of education and the whole screen time thing. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like there's not many people like you. So when I see your letter come in, I always open it. Because I feel like if I don't, the thing I'm missing will directly affect my family as opposed to, you know, a newsletter about national security or, you know, foreign policy or something like that, I suppose. Anyway, sorry, that's why I love it.
Super useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And also you really stand out honestly, as a dad, right? You talk about being a dad more than I think a lot do. And we need more dads.
Top job. It's your top job.
Dads.
It's your top job.
Totally. So in any case, so the tiny letter, I send out monthly. The chapter thing, they just came to me. They're launching now. It's a new platform. They have a handful of creators with similar sizes to me. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 4 weeks of content that's curated by me. I'm going to record some videos. And there's a forum where you can discuss and you can answer. I can answer all the questions. So there's plenty of time to answer questions. And so it's a paid but kind of like very private little opportunity, more than a Zoom talk, which I give, or, in-person talk, and different from a newsletter, different from a podcast. So I hope it'll be fun. I hope we get a good group. It's starting on September 20th.
Yeah, that's awesome. Everybody should do it. Everybody should sign up. If you've got, you're so accessible and fun to talk to and so smart. I mean, you're so good at analyzing information and helping us understand it. So everybody should follow Anya on Twitter and all of this. But, I mean, I think that before I let you go, I just want to ask about the year ahead. I think I'm more, I guess, afraid than I have been, because what I've seen play out in my local Board of Education and schools, and not just the COVID stuff. I'm most worried now because I feel like that will end someday. But what we're seeing ramp up now is this concern over curriculum, specifically when it comes to how history is taught, how anything that has anything racial involved in it is taught. And so at our BOE, the parents were screaming, I don't want any of this diversity and inclusion stuff, which is just code for CRT. And I'm sitting here going, my mom was a public school teacher in the 80s teaching this stuff. Granted, it was in the city of Syracuse, but like, this isn't new. It's not radical. It's super important. And so I just want to know what you're thinking about, writing about, and concerned about when it comes to that issue that so many parents are also divided over now. This bullshit over, those are my thoughts.
So what I find really helpful in thinking about this, and I have more reporting personally to do, but I've seen reporting, and there's a piece that I saw just this morning on Bulwark about this is an organized effort by the far right, by QAnon, by peddlers of misinformation. They have successfully, and they have a vertical, right? They have Fox News, they have blogs, they have websites, they have Facebook groups, and they have a successful culture war play that's organized around the public schools. And they have this constellation of issues. They got vaccines, masks. They've got critical race theory, which is a thing which is actually just an obscure academic, lane of thought that has zero to do with what's taught in our public schools, right? It has nothing to do with teaching kids that the Civil War was about slavery, which is just history that kids need to know, right? So this is not grassroots. It's not spontaneous. It's not actually dividing a bunch of parents in every community. There's a hardcore of people that are going from community to community and riling people up. They're doing it on Facebook. They're organizing, and they're not representative. I mean, it's not like every parent in your community is suddenly going crazy. Like, there's a small group of people because people are discontented, right? It's a scary time in America, and people are responding in a lot of different ways. And but just knowing that these are like very committed activists, and they're not just parents from your community that happen to be crazy, I feel like can be helpful. I don't know how you defuse them, though, or deprogram them.
I actually think that you have to be an activist yourself. If you've never done anything, join the PTA, whatever, you now have, there's an email chain. It's happening in your school district where parents that are concerned, and if you call yourself anything remotely progressive or liberal and you're not doing anything, you are just as bad. That's my judgment. But, I also wonder what your answer to the question that concerned parents have when they say, well, you're teaching my kids, my white kids, to hate who they are, to be ashamed of who they are. My answer to that is if your kid feels that way, you're a bad parent. You're not doing parenting right. It's not the teachers. Teachers teach parents parent. But what's your answer to a parent who complains that, they're teaching their kids to hate themselves? Well, they're white kids to hate them, their whiteness.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would have to say is that the world that they live in is a lot more diverse than the world that maybe you grew up in. And it's a basic survival skill to understand how to get along with different kinds of people. And in order to do that, you need to have a sense of your own identity as a white person that is not grounded in innate superiority. If you can't grapple with the role that people who looked like me took in the past, there's no moving forward, And on the positive side of things, on the other side, what's facing your kid is a world of being able to have warm and authentic relationships with people of all different backgrounds who are going to make up the world that they're going to live in.
I just got to say, I love that you took a beat to think about that answer because it was such a thoughtful answer. Thank you for that. I know that's a tough one. I've just been thinking a lot about it. Last question. The Art of Screen Time, Digital Parenting Without Fear is one of the most important books any parent can own. There's all the latest research, and I wonder how often you have, how much you've updated it, how much you feel like you need to update it. And if there's anything I don't recall, I should go back and read it. I should probably read it every year. And I know you're updating it in many ways, including the newsletter, just the research. But I do want to tell you, and I got my daughter's permission to tell you this. She snuck out at 2:30 in the morning. I caught her. I took her phone and her iPad. I told her we'll talk about this in the morning or something like that. And I logged into her phone for the first time in, I don't know, a long, long time to see what she was doing. And I see her, Anya, texting. I'm like, I have her phone and her iPad. So next day, I decided not to bust her in the moment. I wanted to wait because I don't want to get her worked up. I wanted her to go to sleep. And so next day I bust her and I go, you were texting. How? And she goes, she's so smart. She goes, it must have just gone through late. I was like, I was like, that's good. That's good. But no. I saw you text and I go, how? Now this time you have to answer honestly or else you're just hurting our trust that we have. Yeah. And she just takes a long beat. She goes, the old mini iPad. So my question is, how much have you thought or heard? Because I've heard this from a few parents. Our kids have burner phones now. Now that I got the mini iPad, but is she getting my Palm Pilot and hot wiring that thing? She find an old chart. Anyway, my big question is, how much have you updated this book, and how much of kind of research and culture changed since you published it? Just a couple of years ago? When did it come out?
A couple of years ago. Well, it came out in 2018. There was a paperback in 2020, which was already updated a little bit for the first kind of few months of remote learning and kind of, honestly, because the world moved in my direction in the sense that there's no more screen time purists out there. Nobody got through 18 months of pandemic parenting without a TV. Like that didn't happen, or an iPad. So if there's one, I'd love to hear from one. If they did, great for you. Good for you. But so people are like, okay, I can't restrict this. I can't wall it off. What do I do? How do I manage it? And it sounds like you're doing all the right things, Pete. Like the trust is there. The relationship is there. That's what you need to preserve. We have less and less control as our kids get older. All we have is our relationships with them and their knowledge that we believe in them, that we want them to do the right thing, the value that we've instilled in them. They're going to screw up and they're going to see things they're not supposed to see, say things they're not supposed to say, make mistakes. And what's important is that they're able to repair. And look, we're all trying to find that balance. I know I am. I know I get buried in my phone and my kids pull me out of it. So it's kind of mutual at this point.
Yeah. I just always feel like there is a difference. They always call you out. Your kids will call you, look, what about you and your phone? I'm like, my brain is developed.
Yeah. Right.
Is that accurate, or is that a bullshit argument I'm making?
We all have the ability to have an unhealthy relationship with technology.
Fair enough.
Sure, if you could say, okay, yeah, like alcohol or marijuana, it's maybe you have more capacity to have good functioning around it, but that doesn't mean it's like there's no such thing as excessive use. That's certainly not the case.
I always love how you put things out on Twitter and ask people if this is happening in your life, contact me. You're such a great reporter that way with all those anecdotes. And I just got one more for you and I'll let you go, which is she also, as part of her well-written apology about all this, she said, I just wanted to have some excitement. I feel like my summer was boring and that everybody else had a great time. And I was like, Mother, you went to camp? You went to Mexico? You have a pool? And I was like, wanting to name up. But the truth is, as this young girl, my daughter knows because she made a speech about the dangers of social media when she was in 5th grade and won the state district-wide speech contest, that that it depresses you. So I said, she's like, all my friends had a good time. I'm like, no, you think that because you saw their posts. That's why you think that. They were bored too, just as you were.
That's so important. That's such great perspective.
Yeah, that's hard to teach that, I guess, perspective.
I mean, the fantasy when you're a teenager is that everybody's having fun without you. And that's what social media is. Yes. It's so hard to deprogram from that.
Where are you on dropping your child off into the wilderness for a day? Where are you on age? What's the best age? That's what I always want to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are my 9-year-old. She started 5th grade at a charter school and it's in Manhattan. It's one stop away in the subway. So right now we're walking them back and forth. We're taking them on the subway, but they really want to go by themselves.
Great.
She and her best friend.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll be fine. Right. I mean,
basically wilderness. It's basically wilderness.
I mean, I just think it's great that you're doing it. It's going to teach them so much more. They have so much more confidence when they do things on their own, as opposed to being afraid to, walk up and ask for change. I'm so tired of parents doing everything for themselves, for their kids. It doesn't make them, thank you so much for talking to me. Keep up the great work. Loving the newsletter. Excited about the new book. And as always, I love to have you here joining me. Thank you, Anya.
Anytime, Pete. Thank you so much.
All right, Anya Kamanetz. Let her know you heard her here on the show. Go follow her on Twitter and let her know. And thank you to Anya, and thank you to Maura, and thank you to you for listening today, because I wouldn't do the show if you weren't listening, because you're an awesome person, and I really appreciate you listening and reaching out to me and letting me know that you listen and what you like and what you don't like, and hanging out with us and supporting the show and being my friend and everything that you do. I like it, and I see you, and I hear you, and I appreciate you, and thank you. To everybody, you guys are the best. All right, so that is all I've got for you on today's show. There's one more thing I want to play for you before we go. Here is a great clip, old clip of somebody tweeting this today. George Carlin on abortion. Years ago, my dad took me to the Syracuse Civic Center to see George Carlin, and he did this bit about abortion, and I'll never forget because people started walking out of the theater like they'd never. It was just a weird thing. He's a famous comedian, and they were shocked by this, and they got up and left. My dad was so pissed, not about the bit, but that people would pay for an event and leave early. Anyway, here he is, George Carlin on abortion from years ago.
Boy, these conservatives are really something, aren't they? They're all in favor of the unborn. They will do anything for the unborn. But once you're born, you're on your own. Pro-life conservatives are obsessed with the fetus from conception to 9 months. After that, they don't want to know about you. They don't want to hear from you. No, nothing. No neonatal care, no daycare, no Head Start, no school lunch, no food stamps, no welfare, no nothing. If you're pre-born, you're fine. If you're preschool, you're fucked. Conservatives don't give a shit about you until you reach military age. Then they think you are just fine, just what they've been looking for. Conservatives want live babies so they can raise them to be dead soldiers. Pro-life. Pro-life. These people aren't pro-life. They're killing doctors. What kind of pro-life is that? What, they'll do anything they can to save a fetus, but if it grows up to be a doctor, they just might have to kill it? They're not pro-life. You know what they are? They're anti-woman. Simple as it gets. Anti-woman. They don't like them. They don't like women. They believe a woman's primary role is to function as a broodmare for the state. Pro-life.
There you go. George Carlin on abortion, the legend. All right, that's it. I love you guys. You're the best. I'll talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll, take us out, buddy.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand